So after a couple of months of waiting, Godzilla vs. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Issue 5 is finally out, the finale for this Kaiju Toku crossover. And although this series has had its ups and downs, like I've said, the best way to describe this series is smashing your toys together and making them fight. And that's kind of how this finale goes down with King Ghidorah versus the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers versus Godzilla in this series finale. Now, when it comes to plot and story, there's not a lot in this issue. It's mostly fighting between King Ghidorah, Godzilla, and the combined forces of the Dragon Zord and the Dino Megazord forming the Ultra Dino Megazord, or whatever they call that form. There's a bunch of different names for it. But they form that, and together, they're able to defeat King Ghidorah just like that. And it's over before you even know it. Although I will say the artwork is amazing when it comes to these fight scenes and these giant monsters. That's one thing I've praised constantly in these reviews, is the actions, and the artist did a really good job with the monsters and the fight scenes and the character designs, apart from the Ranger suits that are big, buff, and bulky, looking like legacy figures. They're my only gripes with those designs, but the artwork for the fight scenes in this comic series has been phenomenal, and I really like it. But as for plot and as for story, there's not much to say. I mean, the Rangers and Godzilla, they defeat King Ghidorah. Rita tries jumping in. Rita gets mollywocked and sent in between both universes, which is something I'll talk about later. And then Godzilla tries to fight the Ultra Dino Megazord, but the Rangers get teleported away at the last moment because Godzilla tried fighting anything that was around him. So, yeah, that's all I've got to say with this comic. Now, the ending is very interesting because it has Rita floating in between dimensions of Godzilla and Power Rangers, and you get this awesome single-page image of Rita and her minions floating through the dimensions, and you see all these different iterations of Godzilla and the different Power Ranger dimensions where you see Draken, which is interesting. You see Draken sitting on his throne. You see Dino Charge, and you see RPM, because they're in their own separate universes, and it says The End with a question mark. So no doubt about it, they are sequel baiting if we get another sequel for this comic. But I feel like a sequel for this comic isn't too hard to do. I mean, they can fight another big bad in the Godzilla Kaiju universe, whether it be Mothra or Mechagodzilla or Biollante or any Godzilla monster, really, they can fight up against and see how powerful they are. So there's so much potential for sequels when it comes to this comic, because Godzilla does have a big arsenal of monsters from their universe. And not only that, with Rita in between the dimensions, you can always bring Lord Zed into the sequel comic if we get another one. But not only that, the image of Draken at the end does sort of set up for Draken to maybe be the bad guy if we get a sequel in that one. Draken is a fan favorite character ever since Boom Studios introduced him, and he's kind of like the main flagship character for the Boom Studio comics, kind of sort of, up there with Ranger Slayer and Green Ranger Matt and stuff like that. But it's cool to see this crossover happen, because I never thought we would get a crossover like this. And although it's an interesting concept and probably had a lot more potential, like I said, the best way to describe this comic is someone grabbing their toys and sort of making up an adventure as they go along. Was the comic terrible? No, not really. It was a nice little distraction from everything going on with the Power Ranger comics happening, and it's a nice distraction because this is an IDW comic and not a Boom Studios comic, so it doesn't fall in line with the Boom Studios universe, so it's its own little separate thing. But yeah, like I said, the comic was kind of like a good read through to read. I think I might binge it once it's in trade back form, and maybe my thoughts will change of the comic later down the line, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible. I feel like if you read this comic in one sitting, like all 5 issues, you might have a different opinion of it, but it's still a fun read through, and I'll probably read through the entire 5 issues later down the line and see what I think of the comic in the nearby future. But by all means, the comic wasn't terrible. It was a really cool concept and a really cool idea, but I feel like they could have done a lot more with it. But then again, it is sort of like a fantasy crossover match between these two franchises, and I kind of wish the two flagship characters did a lot more fighting. I mean, they only did like a couple of fighting in each issue, and then it was broken up by monster attacks or Rita Repulsor or something like that. I kind of wish we got to see more of a brawl between the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Godzilla and stuff like that, because they teased it up to have this big epic showdown between the two characters, but as you read the comic and you kind of understood where the story was going, then you kind of realized the story beats it was going to have, where Godzilla and the Rangers would join forces, and then they'd fight probably something like King Ghidorah or something like that. So you kind of knew where the story was going to go in the end, but like I said, by all means, it isn't terrible. It's a fun little... But anyway, guys, what did you think of Power Rangers vs. Godzilla issue number 5? Do you think it was a good comic, a good finale, or what did you think of this mini comic series in general? Tell me in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. With that said, I'm going to bring this video to a close. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I will see you guys later. Peace out, take care, bye.